There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. Our program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-Christian, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-American, and hereby only the grace of God. Many things we could be talking about today, but I don't think there's anything any more important than our southern border. Donald Trump recently said, Joe Biden's border disaster is the greatest crisis in the history of our country. That was said by our former president in front of Sean Hannity about a week ago. Former President Donald Trump recently released a scathing statement on the escalating border crisis, saying the current problem is rapidly turning the United States into a cesspool of humanity. The greatest number of illegal aliens in the history of our country are pouring in by the millions. They are totally unchecked and unvetted, can do whatever they want and go wherever they want. Our country's rapidly becoming a cesspool of humanity. Murderers, drug dealers, and criminals of all shapes and sizes are a big part of this massive migration. Tens of thousands of people are coming from Haiti, and many more now from countries in Africa, even more so now than South America. Nothing is done, and the corrupt mainstream media is giving almost no attention to what will be perhaps the greatest crisis in the history of our country. This is not just a border crisis. This is a crisis. May God bless America. And this was all posted on Trump's webpage. More than 200,000 migrants illegally entered the United States in August. And folks, that's a 317% increase from the same time last year under President Trump. Former acting Border Patrol Chief Mark Morgan made some statements, and I want to reference those in this broadcast. He noted that the Department of Homeland Security is leaving 224 miles of Texas border exposed to this invasion. Overwhelmed Biden administration border officials are now leaving 224 miles of the southern border in Texas unpatrolled and open for a massive invasion. That happens to be a violation of Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. This, sources told former acting Customs and Border Patrol Commissioner Mark Morgan. He noted this is criminal. This was on Newsmax on Sunday, September 17th. He added the U.S. has lost control of the border in the Del Rio sector. He noted this would not have happened under the Trump administration. Something that just hit my desk today, Thursday, September 30th, 2021, Marco Rubio, one of our senators from Florida, noted that up to 120 migrants headed to the U.S. border. That's right, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida is saying the worst is yet to come, warned that as many as 120 migrants are headed now to our country. The Florida Republican made his remarks in a Wednesday tweet. He wrote, and I'm going to quote, there are between 80,000 and 120,000 migrants transiting various countries headed toward the U.S., and under the Biden de facto open borders, the worst is yet to come. Rubio did not provide any further details in the tweet. Both Republicans and Democrats have criticized the Biden administration after nearly 15,000 Haitian migrants gathered along the southern border in and around the small Texas town of Del Rio. Were either expelled back to Haiti or dispersed in the U.S. Well, I don't think many of them went back to Haiti. We'll have more on that later. Under Biden's order, Department of Homeland Security boss confirms 12,400 Haitians released in the U.S. this month, the month of August 2021. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told Fox News at least 12,000 Haitian migrants have been released into the United States after entering the country near Del Rio, Texas. His words in a direct quote, last Sunday, I heard it, saw it, approximately, I think it's about 10,000 or so, 12,000 maybe. He noted that he was responding that when asked how many were being admitted into the United States. It could go even higher, he added. The number that aren't returned could be even higher. The FAA controls everything that flies below a certain altitude and around this country. And recently, they stopped Fox News from droning, sending a drone up over Del Rio, over the border in Texas, showing where the migrants were. You all saw it on television, I'm sure. If you watched the news at all on Fox, they had the drone up and they were sharing it with us, the only one. CNN, MSNBC, and the Alphabet networks have all ignored the massive invasion of illegal aliens that's been touched off by the Biden administration's welcoming mat. They and their Democrat colleagues don't want the public to see evidence of the 200,000 a month arriving. Fox News, to its everlasting honor, is covering the invasion thoroughly and has been using drones to show the magnitude of the problem. Well, everything was going fine until just recently. Recently, on a Tucker Carlson's top-rated program, news broke that the FAA have grounded Drone Fox that was using the Del Rio to show at least 10,000 Haitians sheltered under a bridge down there on the U.S. side of the border. The FAA later made an update claiming that the Border Patrol, incidentally, the Border Patrol from D.C., not down on the border. Anyway, the politicians requested the TFR. The one that sent this in, Thomas Lifson, noted, I'm going to quote him, he said, "I don't like the language request to operate one bit, for it gives a government agency veto power over news reporting. I presume that Fox News is fighting the order in court, but they must also make a steady stream of requests, hourly if necessary, to operate drone flights to follow the crowds of immigrants at Del Rio and elsewhere along the border." And we have this, Biden's grand return of catch and release. Boy, we sure needed that. Should breaking into the U.S. illegally be a sure thing win for the lawbreakers? It is with Joe Biden in the saddle. Article was sent to me from Monica Showalter. We get so many, but I try to pick out the ones that I think give us the best view. I often quote her. So much for do not come, as Kamala Harris once said. Migrants are not fools, and pay attention to what the Biden administration proceeds to do and respond accordingly. Two things are going on that show the extent of this new catch and release farce. As I've reported the other day, Biden has released a vast community of 16,000 illegals, mostly from Haiti, camped out under a bridge near the Del Rio, Texas border, into our country without so much as a court date. His claims of mass deportations are just a few done for show. There's not many. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed that thousands of Haitian migrants are being released into the interior of the U.S. There's been a surge of Haitian immigrants, which have seen more than 14,000 immigrants camped under the bridge in Del Rio, with reports of tens of thousands more on the way. I just saw it today, just me talking now. I just saw last night on the news where it's anticipated or showed pictures of them, increasing numbers coming over from Guatemala into Mexico and then right up straight to our border. Where are these coming from? I've got more in this program on it, but from South America, as a subtitle unto itself that we will cover today. Biden said that some, meaning in his word, that was Biden's spin, meaning thousands. But actually only a precious few, some 300, who have broken into the U.S. illegally have been deported back to Haiti. Yeah, some. Most are being sent to their destinations of choice in the U.S., and of course, we're paying for it, the taxpayers. And they're not being vetted and they're not being vaxxed. Well, with just a short notice to report, that's all they have to do, just a notice to report to the local ICE office papers instead of so much as a notice to appear with a fixed court date. How easy it is and how seldom it'll happen. Either paper is easily ignored, and usually is, by such lawbreakers, and Biden refuses to allow an interior enforcement of immigration law. So the migrants know that they've gotten here scot-free. Applying legally, you see, is for suckers, and they don't think they won't tell their friends. You don't think they will? You better believe they will. Why the speed? Well, the Bidenites want public relations as their prime priority, same as they did with the Afghan pullout. Given the photos of the vast Scuola del Rio migrant camp are a political liability, Biden has his priorities. Too bad about the economy, let alone what the American people want. Here's another issue well worth noting. Migrants, not being stupid, are gaming the system in an additional way. They're throwing away their identification papers. Just listen to this and you'll see. Virtually all of them are previously resettled refugees in third world countries, such as Chile and Brazil. They took those deals as long as decades ago, but decided they wanted to upgrade. So they came to the States, knowing that Biden was inviting them in, and Biden had halted deportations. Costs a lot of money to migrate, and being no fools, they shelled it out only because they were sure. Now, the ID cards they had from Chile and Brazil made them ineligible for asylum right off the bat. No ID, no problem. Without those cards, they can claim to be anyone, and they can get the appeals upgraded they're looking for. Country shopping for the best package deal of benefits. Well, it's getting to be pretty common under Biden. He created the situation to start with, you know. How the immigration officials sort out is anybody's guess. The reality on the ground says the Bidenites won't even try. So once again, the migrants win, and the illegals will get in. That won't be where it ends, folks. The illegal migrants will also tell their friends and relatives that it's also very easy. Guess what the friends and relatives are going to do? And Biden here thinks he's got a problem. Whenever this happens as a problem, he sweeps it under the rug. What's he done with this snatch and release is only making the problem get bigger. But he doesn't mind that at all. He wants the illegals in. You know why? One day he hopes they'll get citizenship, and with that the vote. Who's he think they're going to vote for? Congress, the courts, the states, and anyone else out there have got to get tough with this lunacy. And since Biden responds only to cameras, anyone else out there must keep their camera on, keep it ready, and help get the word out. We got one governor that's really done that. He's taken some action. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is suing the Biden administration over their destructive border policy. That's right, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis filed a lawsuit against the Biden administration over its destructive and illegal immigration policies, claiming the White House is putting ideology over the rights of residents in the Sunshine State. I think it's intentional. I think it's ideological, a quote from Governor DeSantis. They want a massive illegal migration into this country. Governor Ron DeSantis just announced he's suing Biden over his out-of-control border crisis and is signing an executive order to prohibit the release of illegal criminal migrants into Florida. Take note, Republicans. This is how you fight back. It's very clear the open borders is the Biden administration policy. They want a massive illegal migration into this country. A quote from Governor DeSantis. He continued, they are farming out people all across communities across the United States and including here in Florida. Republican governors respond to Pulaski's dismissal of the U.S. efforts on border control. Right back at her. Starts with the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, dismissing the growing crisis at the southern border, and it was last week, and she claimed that the Republican governors are failing to put forward, her words, solutions or steps for the Biden administration to control the crisis. In other words, the Republicans aren't doing anything. Well, in reality, 26 GOP governors penned a letter to the Biden administration pleading for a meeting with the president to discuss the lack of federal agents' action regarding the border. Republican governors who signed on to the letter reminded Psaki of their request, which was subsequently ignored by the president. On the same subject, the same people, more than half the nation's governors sent a letter to the White House. This is within the past couple of weeks. They were demanding a meeting with President Biden to address the escalating humanitarian disaster taking place along the U.S.-Mexico border. The letter read, quote, "As chief executive of our states, we request a meeting with you at the White House to bring an end to the national security crisis created by 8 months of unenforced borders. The months-long surge in illegal crossings has instigated an international humanitarian crisis, spurred a spike in international criminal activity, and opened the floodgates to human trafficking and drug smugglers endangering public health and safety in our states. A crisis that began at our southern border now extends beyond to every state and requires immediate action before the situation worsens." A quote from their letter. It continues, and I'm quoting the letter, "The negative impacts of an unenforced border policy on the American people can no longer be ignored. Border apprehensions are up almost 500% compared to last year, totaling more than 1.3 million more people than the population of 9 U.S. states. Approximately 9,700 illegal apprehensions have prior convictions. Cartels and traffickers are making $14 million a day moving people illegally across the border. More fentanyl has been seized this fiscal year than in the last 3 years combined. Almost 10,500 pounds of fentanyl, with only 2 milligrams proving fatal. You know, folks, that's enough to kill 7 times the U.S. population. The crisis has affected every state and can no longer be ignored, the coalition of governors said. While your responsibilities as commander-in-chief are substantial, ending the national crisis and securing our states must be a priority, they wrote. Therefore, we come directly to you, seeking an open and constructive dialogue regarding border enforcement on behalf of U.S. citizens in our states and all those hoping to become U.S. citizens. We must end the current crisis and return to border operations that respect the laws of our land and the lives of all people, including those in our states, looking to the federal government to enforce and protect our nation's border. Due to the emerging crisis, we respectfully request a meeting as soon as your schedule allows, preferably within the next 15 days. And I know you'll be shocked to hear this, but I haven't heard of the president responding to it yet. So, how did 15,000 Haitians suddenly find their way to Del Rio, Texas? Monica Showalter sent me a report, and I'm going to reference from that in what I tell you now. The migrant mass of some 15,000, mostly Haitians, now illegally on U.S. territory in a squalid, never-before-seen shantytown under a bridge near Del Rio, Texas, demands some action. Here's how bad it is. It's natural to want to know how this formed, isn't it? Why is it so big? Why did it end up in Del Rio, Texas, a town ill-equipped to accommodate them? How did these people fly or sail from faraway Haiti? Are more on the way? And where the heck is Joe Biden and his brainless, deranged border czar, Kamala Harris? Joe was last seen on a beach in Delaware as this crisis fireballed, and Harris was last seen flipping a coin to kick off a sports event. The only actual action from this administration in this monster crisis has been a ham-fisted attempt to shut down Fox News drone. This in a bid to halt the photos that so embarrassed the administration. Many people are asking, Open borders, Democrats promoting a phony narrative to argue for letting them in. We know their answers are fake, and we know why they really want them in, don't we? In closing, I want to just read from an article I received it a day or two ago from Matt Margolis. He notes that the next presidential election may be a few years away, but if voters have anything to say about it now, it doesn't look good for the Dems. The latest Rasmussen poll shows that in a hypothetical matchup between Donald Trump and Joe Biden in 2024, Trump would win 51 to 41%. Independent voters gave their support to Trump by a whopping 20 points over Biden. Of course, many don't expect Biden to serve his full term, let alone run again in 2024, making Kamala Harris the presumptive Democratic nominee. As bad as Joe Biden performs against Trump right now, Harris performs worse, as Trump would win against her by 52 to 39%. According to Rasmussen, quote, an overwhelming 74% of Republicans think it's a good idea for Trump to consider a 2024 presidential campaign. 26% of Democrats and 44% of voters not affiliated with either party agree. Even Democrats are having a hard time looking past Biden's incompetence. About 1 in 5 Democrats they'd say they'd vote for Trump over either Biden or Harris if the next presidential election were held now. This according to the recent survey. While Trump would get 84% from Republican voters in a hypothetical rematch with Biden, only 75% of Democrats say they'd vote to elect Biden again. This according to the Rasmussen survey. This problem would be even worse for Dems in a Trump-Harris 2024 matchup, with just 71% of Democrat voters saying they'd pick Harris over Trump. There's still plenty of time between now and 2024, but in the months since his botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, things haven't gotten any better for Biden, and that should be concerning the Dems. As we look at this one issue, that's all I have time for, one issue this week, but we've got so many other issues. You know, we just now had the generals contradict what our president said in the White House on what should be done in Afghanistan. Funny, the general said we needed to leave 2,500 or 3,500 troops behind. Biden says, I don't remember telling that to me. One thing is certain, somebody's lying. We've either got a lying president or we got lying generals. Maybe we got both lying, I don't know. But that's another problem we've got. We've got a debt ceiling that can't be raised. It's not at this time. Will our country close down? We've got rising unemployment. We've got forced masks on people and forced jabs in our arms. A lot of things we have that we didn't have under Donald Trump. Oh, yeah, I know. A lot of times he said things that were kind of embarrassing, didn't he? But you know what? Most of those embarrassing statements that he made were true. It may have been proven later, but they turned out to be pretty much square on, didn't they? We've got a decision to make, folks. How much effort are we going to make a difference? I would encourage you to do your part as I'll try to do mine. Goodbye. God bless for another week.